So I think ideally, yep. Good morning and welcome to everybody. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you so much for being with us. Uh, I thank all the participants for continuing with the course. And today's lecture is a very interesting one, especially for me, since I come from the same background of language studies, and we have an erudite amongst us to deliver the lecture. Let me give you a brief introduction of ma'am. Professor Anuradhawagle is Dean of the Shinoy Gyombab School of Languages, Goa University. Herself a French language teacher for more than 30 years and head of the French language department for 20 years now, Madame Bagre also heads the School of Language and Literature Studies in Goa University. She has earned various international fellowships and has a vast experience in both the theory and the practice of translation studies. Madame Bagre has various national and international publications to her credit, including two books in French, a book on the cultural icons of India, and another on the contrastive grammar of French and English. He also has various research papers that to her credit, and she has read them in various national conferences all across India and international conferences in France, Canada, Australia, Argentina. I'm just naming a few of the countries because there is such a long list that, etc. All right. Okay. I've left deliberately the best for the last. Madame Vagre has received two prestigious awards from the French government: the Chevalier de l'Ordre des Palmes Académiques, Knight in the Order of the Academic Palms in July 2009, and the Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres, Knight in the Order of Arts and Letters, in August 2018 for her accomplishments in the areas of teaching and scholarship and her high level of commitment and contribution to reinforcing relations between India and France. She has served for 2 terms as the president of the Indian Association of Teachers of French and has been president of the Asia Pacific Commission from 2008 to 2012. Ma'am was also vice president of the Paris-based International Federation of French Teachers from 2012 to 2016. Since 2022, she is president of the Alliance Française, the cultural wing of the French Embassy in Goa. Noteworthy is also the fact that Madame Wagre is chairperson of the Advisory Board on Internationalization of the Goa University. I extend a warm welcome to you again, ma'am, and would like to invite you to begin your talk and presentation.
Thank you so much, Zui. That was an introduction. It's an academic introduction of who and what I am. But like I've said, always said that we are because I mean, not only because we think, but also because what we speak, and we are actually because of all the languages we know, the cultures we are. Exposed to, and it gives me great pleasure to be here as a part of the certificate course and actually to bring in a new perspective. I know all of you who are present here today and who are participating in this course are actually experts in your own field, and I'm not going to encroach upon them, though I may touch upon them very, very briefly so that I put everything in context. I think that is what is important. And I'm trying to say here that, what we are doing what our country is doing in international relations or in building bridges with Europe and the EU in particular is also related to languages. And it's also related to the languages of these two countries, of these two subcontinents, continent versus subcontinent, whatever you may call it. So actually, if you really look at it, Europe and India are like continents on their own. I mean, India is like a continent because we have different states, we have different cultures, we have different communities, we have different languages. If Europe boasts of 250 languages, I mean, I think we have many, many more. If you really look at it, we have so many languages, dialects, and of course a huge number of official languages, and therefore I think that languages are in fact very important to this whole connection between EU and India. Just very recently, I think it is 2 or 3 days ago itself, we had this meeting with where Shri Jaishankar, Dr. Jaishankar, he spoke about India's strategic connection and relations with the Mediterranean through the Middle East, during the IMEC, in the context of the IMEC. And so, so that itself shows that there is an interest, there's a strategic interest for India in Europe. And I think, I mean, I'm putting aside what Europe is thinking about it. I'm just going to talk about how India is engaging in this and how languages are in fact going to impact this whole dialogue between the two, because your dialogue itself says language, and you have to have a dialogue with people who speak the same language. And I think that is the best dialogue you can have, the best communication you can have, is when you juxtapose these two areas of study. So now, if I may just go ahead and I'll just give you a brief idea of what my presentation is going to be. And so I am then, and after a brief introduction, which I have partly done, I'm going to talk about the strategic relations between EU and India, which you all know. But I'm just going to give you my own experience of how I have engaged as a French professor, and what I have seen in this in how this whole thing is playing out. Then language is a tool for soft power projection. There is no doubt about that. Europe sans frontières is also, Europe is actually beyond Europe in a way, and that is there are no borders to Europe as well. We'll speak about that. I'm just going to give a brief talk briefly also about the case of French mobility, because that's the mobility I know best. But I'm also aware, and I'm ready to take questions on other countries as well. I have had the privilege to learn so many languages. Apart from Indian languages, which I speak already, English, of course, we all speak. And then there is Hindi, which we have all learned from school. And then Marathi, which is my mother tongue. Konkani, which is the language I speak and work in today, because I am actually a translator from Konkani to French, and actually the only translator from Konkani to French. And I've translated literary works from Konkani into French. And I'm actually doing right now a book also on Jnanpith Award winner. So engaging in, so there is therefore an interest in Indian languages. And there is an interest in Indian culture. There is an interest in India, in Europe as well. So this is, I think, very important. Then I have also seen that the mobility towards Europe is perhaps much simpler than mobility to other parts of the world, to the US, to Latin America, to other countries, even in the Far East. So mobility is easier towards Europe. There are lots and lots of mechanisms in place. There are institutions in place, and I think those are the connections which have to be used. Then I'll briefly touch upon the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, because I think everybody should know how this whole language thing works. And at the end, to conclude, I'll just say how you all in the fields with which you work, how you could use languages to leverage your position, to leverage your profession, to leverage your careers. And I think that is going to be an important part also of what I'm going to talk about. Let me just get a little anecdotal, because I think this is very important. And if you look at the linguistic map of Europe, you have three basic families of languages there. And one is the Slavic languages. One group is the Slavic languages, Russian, etc. Then you have your Germanic languages, and then you have your Romance languages there. So you will see that there are three, so you have the red, which is the Romance, the brown, which is the Germanic, and the blues, which are the Slavic languages. Now, the Slavic languages being actually another branch, the Germanic and the Romance languages are mostly, they are not mostly, they are a part of what is called the Indo-European family of languages. So there is therefore, so the connections are from several centuries, and the connections between Europe and India. The idea, why do we call them Indo-European languages? That there is a connection between Indian languages and European languages. So that is something itself which tells us that there is a requirement for engagement, that this is not something new. This is something which has been there for a very, very long time. Of course, historical connections of Europe with India, all the history students present here, all the history researchers present here, I don't need to tell you what it is, but I think it's just important to know that India has been connected very, very deeply with two countries in Europe, other than, of course, with three countries in Europe, and the first one being, of course, Great Britain, and then the other two, which are France and Portugal. So we all know that Pondicherry was a colony of the French, and from 1674 to 1954, so much after we got independence from England, but from Britain. But the what is lesser known is what is the how Portuguese has actually come into this country, and how the Portuguese language came into this country. We all French language came into this country through the French schools in Pondicherry, in other states, in other area states now. Chandernagore in Bengal, yeah, then Yanon, Mahe, etc. But Portuguese was mainly in the state of Goa, and also in Damandiu, somewhere quite close to where you all are, Zui. So the, now it was taught in the French schools, and you will say that why was French taught or Portuguese taught to Indians? I mean, when did Indians and start learning French and Portuguese? So when schools were set up, obviously there was a certain class of the population which actually enrolled themselves in these schools and started learning. Interestingly, Portuguese came into Goa and brought along with itself French. And the first medical college, actually, the school, which is called the Escola Medica e Chirurgica, was actually set up in Goa. It was the first school in Asia, first medical college in Asia, and the books were all in French. So the students had no choice but to learn French. So all the books from which they learned, the books taught them actually medicine more than teaching them the language. And they had to know the terminology for the organs of the body, the different parts of the body, for different procedures, how everything worked, functioning of everything, of the heart, etc. They learned it all in French. And now you see, so historically, there has been a huge interest in the French language, even in a state like Goa. And then eventually all these doctors moved to Bombay, moved to Pune, Maharashtra, and Maharashtra became a huge center for learning French. And Portuguese, of course, remained pretty much in Goa, but then went down south. And it was spoken in some of the states, with a mixture of the local language. So Portuguese is one language which has a number of creoles. Creoles are these languages which are actually mixtures in a very broad sense of languages. So it kind of had an influence. So this is a huge. So there has been a huge impact of French, Portuguese, and of course English. That is, I mean, don't even need to talk about that. That there has, because today English is no longer a foreign language for us, and French and Portuguese still remain foreign languages. But they're not so foreign as we think they are. We have an engagement with these languages from the 15th century and 16th century, and so we have actually been learning these languages in some way or the other, for some reason or the other. And I think that is very important for all of us to understand, that these connections between Indo-European family of languages have not started recently, or they are actually, they are very important from the historical perspective. If we really look at the strategic relations between EU and India, there is no doubt that we have set up strategic relations between India and the EU. And if I just touch upon what these strategic relations mean to us and what importance they have for us. If you really look at the first thing is, first of all, I think the EU and India, we share natural values of democracy. They may be monarchies, but they are constitutional monarchies. So there is parliamentary system in most countries. There are visits at all levels of governance today, right from heads of states to ministerial level, senatorial level. I have been an interpreter for many years before I actually went into very, very serious academics. And when I was an interpreter and a translator, I have also accompanied delegations of senators from France, and I've been of course, I've also been an interpreter on 2 occasions with Nobel Prize winners who have, come into India and, interacted and engaged with with their counterparts in this country. So we have these. We uphold these natural values. Of course, I don't need to tell you. We follow also the liberal international order, rule-based liberalism, free trade, etc. We are going in. We are into a lot of agreements, commercial agreements at various levels, and so with the government as well. And so and then of course we all the European countries, and we are very committed to multilateralism, part of the UN, WTO, IMF. We are all engaging through all these institutions, and both Europe and India have, of course, upheld human rights, have done a lot for human rights. You know, if there are lawyers here among you, you will understand that human rights are so important, and this is something which I know surely for about France, but France is taken very, very seriously, and so Europe has in some ways connected also to the world, on the level of human rights. If we look at of course, we have also then factor productivity, input versus output, which is a huge thing in the fields of finance. Excuse me, I've just come back from Jaipur and got some kind of a cold. Technology, and of course human skills and labor. We have understood, we have in India a lot of companies, who are actually employing our students here in India in the field for their skills. I have several students from my department who are actually working in companies like Capgemini, like Amazon. A lot of. I have a student who looks after the entire literature catalog of Amazon.fr, sitting here in India. So so we are actually, so our skills and our labor is another thing, but skills definitely. And in this August gathering, I'm sure what is important is our skills. We are good at certain things. We are specialists, and and we are a country of specialists rather, and we can then engage with Europe on several levels, such as finance, technology, and our human skills. We have our strategic processes in place. There is definitely a convergence. There is no doubt about that. This is something which I'm sure all of you are already familiar with, so I'm not really going. And I think this is very important from the language perspective, and that is the sense of community. When there is a sense of community, then there is a lot of interaction, there is a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of people meeting each other at various levels. So then your languages come into place, because if you're talking about sustainable development, I know that we are talking about sustainable tourism, we are talking about so many things, and these are these we have set up SDGs, and which we are all following. And I think both our countries, both Europe and India are committed to the SDGs. We have so many international partnerships and investment strategies. We are creating knowledge bases. I know for sure, because in Goa, is a hub for a lot of meetings, and we had the whole G20 set of meetings here. We had several people from France. Many of our colleagues have actually worked during the G20 with the government to actually facilitate meetings, to facilitate communication. And I think that is but in spite of the fact that they were not really experts in international relations or any experts in the fields in which many of these talks were taking place, and I think that was a pity that we did not have a set of people who were actually experts in the language and in the field which were being discussed, so that there would have been a better engagement. I feel the amount of work which my colleagues had to put themselves through to actually learn all this at the last minute and actually just about manage. And I think just about managing is not enough. And I think what we need to do is we need to know those languages and to be able to engage one-on-one and actually facilitate in a more meaningful way. I think that is what is very important. Of course, both EU and we are looking at new markets. There are new demands, and we all have a commitment to climate change action. We have a commitment to so many things. So basically, we have a sense of community. So we are actually looking at the world as a community. So if in a community, we should be able to speak to each other, and that is, I think, one of the major points which I'm going to come to, and how languages will actually then play a very, very important role in this. If you look at the cultural ties between EU and India, well, apart from the fact that all of us are traveling, a lot of Indians traveling to Europe, a lot of Europeans traveling to India, and if you really look at it, tourism is, you can best enjoy tourism when you actually speak the language in which of the country where you're going. Of course, obviously you're not going to be able to learn all the languages, that's absolutely impossible. But let me tell you, wherever I go in Europe, even if I do not speak the local language, I can definitely find people who speak either French or German, which are the two of the languages which I speak. And I also have a working knowledge of Portuguese. So I always find one language in common, even if I do not have, I do not know the language of that particular country. I mean, I was in Romania recently, and I was amazed at the number of people who spoke French, and and a lot of people could understand French. So I mean, I could manage without Romanian, and I spoke French wherever I could. And there were, any educated Romanian today speaks French. I mean, I don't know if you know that there are Romanian singers who sing in French, and there is a lot of there's a lot of importance in learning one of the major languages of Europe, like French. France is, of course, France was also the cultural hub and for a long, long time over the centuries. And all the artists, all the musicians, everybody came to France. So much so that one didn't know from which country they were in, because they all descended in Paris, and Paris was actually the cultural center of Europe for so many centuries. Now the thing is that now this art and cultural diplomacy continues. We regularly get through the Alliance Française, we regularly get artists who come here. I mean, recently there was a lot of artists who came and did wall art across the major cities in India. And so, I mean, we had this huge wall even in Goa, which was done, and very, very interestingly, by an artist who came from the Reunion Islands. And he did this whole thing. I mean, I wish I could have shown you a picture. I should have added that, but could show it to you later if any of you are interested. Of a style, which is, because his style is fish, and he used those fish on a blue wall and actually created azulejos, which is a Portuguese thing. So you know what? It is. I mean, that artist said that when he read about Goa, he went up and saw what is the artistic interest in Goa, and he found out that there's this azulejos. I know azulejos are those blue tiles, and you find them all over in Europe, in Portugal, also in Spain. And that he used that same artistic sensitivity and actually used his art, which is actually fish, because in Pondicherry he had just fish and nets, and when he came here he suddenly got inspired and he said, I must add a little bit of Portugal to it, because this place is got that Portuguese influence. So we had this beautiful, you can see it on the net, and the Alliance Française Panjim has put up several photographs of that. And so he used the azulejos. So what I'm trying to say is that art and culture is a huge thing in diplomacy as well. We have, I don't know if many of you are aware that the famous painter Raza, he was actually a professor at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And, so he has highly influenced French art, and vice versa. So so cultural ties have gone beyond this. There have been festivals of India in France. There's been Bonjour India in India. Those are festivals which take place every alternate year. And so art and culture play a huge role in diplomacy. Of course, migration and mobility. There is mobility for students. Like I said earlier, that it is easier to be able to go to Europe and study. I mean, for everybody, for our scientists, for our literary persons, for people who are working in IR. I mean, Goa University has an agreement with the Sciences Po, the school Sciences Po in Lyon, and every year 3 of our students go to Sciences Po for a semester for the diploma in European studies, and 3 of their students come to Goa University to study Indian philosophy, sociology, Indian history, or in the Indian political system. So I think these kind of exchanges have been, but obviously people who go there to Sciences Po have to know French. We have to certify that the person can speak French, even if now a lot of people tell me, oh, there are more and more courses available in English in Europe. More and more courses may be available in Europe, but the total engagement and the complete engagement in any of these programs is not possible without knowing the French language, or the German language for that matter. There are so many students. I mean, I know so many scientists who are going to Germany today to learn, to study in German universities. But let me tell you, German language then becomes compulsory there. They have to eventually do it, and they are actually they're a little bit lost when they go, because they really don't know the language, and they have and it takes time for them to pick it up there, because there's this whole burden of studies. And I think these kind of things are best done in your own country. And let me tell you, in all these languages which I'm talking about, French, Portuguese, German, Spanish, there are we have an expertise in our country which is absolutely valuable, which is really very, which you're not perhaps aware of. And when people like Zoe and me, when we speak French like the French. And there is no I mean, I'm sure so do your other faculty members. And that in itself is shows that we have this thing. We are multilingual people, we have this ability to learn languages, and so we should learn these languages. That is one thing which I think even the NEP today is, they're talking about, in what context are they talking about languages or foreign languages? They're talking about foreign languages in the context of internationalization. Number one, you're looking at internationalizing our institutions, then foreign languages play a huge part. We're talking about internationalization through collaboration. Collaborations is another thing. Collaborations are best done when there is also a language element to that collaboration. Just collaborating with a European country like Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, etc., without any language element is absolutely of no use, because I think that is the main that is going to be the focus, that is going to be the fulcrum, that is going to create a better collaboration. And collaborations cannot be done on knowledge alone. It has to be done through dialogue, through communication, etc. And of course, another thing is, and the NEP then also talks about mobility of students. So mobility of students and international mobility for students, it can only be facilitated through language. Let me tell you, any form you fill, they ask you what is the level of French or the level of German or the level of Spanish which you have. So having a very basic level is perhaps not desirable if you are looking for doing something more serious, engaging in any project or in any research work or in any program in Europe. And so it's not very serious to just know the basics. You really do need to up that language element. And let me tell you, and I would like to repeat that it is not so difficult for us. I mean, when you talk to the French and on the Germans, they say it is so difficult for us to learn any third language now, because people who have been brought up in monolingual situations, they will definitely, there's a huge barrier. We don't have that barrier. All of us. I mean, I came to Goa, and in a couple of years I was speaking Konkani. So we all know that whenever we move from one state to another, we very quickly we put we catch the language, the regional language, and we can speak it. So now what I'm trying to say, now let's here this is serious business. We are talking about our own careers and our professions. We're talking about how we are going to go ahead. So I think that is then going to, language is then going to be a game changer for those who are interested in engaging in a more at a high level. There are several opportunities to study in Europe. They're through the Campus France. You can go to your there's through DAD, there's the Fundação Orient for Portuguese. So you can visit their websites and see more. There are many. And of course, like I said, Erasmus Plus has been also a huge game changer in mobility of students from India to European countries. If I one second, I'm sorry. Just trying to change the next one. If you take the case of the French mobility, you will see that there are scholarships available for students at all levels. Whether you're a bachelor student, whether you're a master student, whether you're a PhD, there are scholarships, short term, long term. So there are various durations. You can either do your masters in France, you can do one semester in France, you can do you can do your PhD in France, or you can just go there for your PhD research, which is a short-term scholarship. So there are various durations available. I think the same things are available for other languages as well. But since I know the French system very well, I thought I would just give you an example. So I just said it's a case of French mobility. Of course, various fields in which France is very well known for. So you have gastronomy, which is a huge attraction in France. You have all these schools of cordon bleu, etc., where you can go and study. There's of course enology. We recently sent a student who's gone to do a 1-year bachelor's program in enology, which is the science of wines. He is interesting. The student is interested in being an entrepreneur, actually. He's not really interested in anything very academic, and just thought that after his bachelor's program here, he would go and do this course, so that when he came back, he could be an entrepreneur, work in the wine industry, etc. Political science, like I already said, there's the Sciences Po, wonderful schools, very, very well known. European studies, of course, in many, many universities, including the Sciences Po. Management, because they are very, very well known management studies programs, especially the INSEAD, which is which is world renowned. Sciences in France is very much ahead in life sciences. Of course, one would imagine also in aerospace, because that is where they all are. Film and media studies, huge attraction in France. And let me tell you, film and media studies, there are people from all walks of life who go for that. I'm not talking about people who are actually filmmakers or journalists, or we would like to believe that only people like that are interested in that. But let me tell you, even a person from international relations is interested in film and media studies, because there is this whole thing of art and cultural diplomacy, and film, of course, Indian film industry is a huge soft power. And we have been promoting our films in all these countries in Europe, and also European films in India, so through festivals, etc. So I think we should take it out of our minds that we have to work in a single field. And if we are if we are engaging in, for example, only international relations, that all this has nothing to do with me. Let me tell you, everything has to do with you. And all these fields have something to do with us, whether it's gastronomy, whether it is film and media studies. Recently, I was approached by a person from France, wanted to do a PhD, and she said, I want to work on food as diplomacy. And well, this person was of an Indian origin, and an ex-student of mine from many, many years ago, who had married a French diplomat and traveled all over the world, and said that, I think that I know what it is, because the food you serve in embassies or in residences of ambassadors is very much a part of the diplomacy, and how you serve it, what you serve. And I mean, I know that every time we have a head of state coming to India, in the papers we can read the menus, right? What was served to this person. And I think so that is very important, that how food can actually be used as a thing. And then when you talk about food, you talk about wines, you talk about, I mean, do we pronounce the names correctly? That is the first thing. I did I did one small workshop for the Taj in Goa, in which I helped their staff pronounce the names of the wines correctly, and to pronounce the names of the dishes which were French in their menus correctly. You cannot say volo vent and things like that. When it makes a huge difference, because people do travel, people do know how things are pronounced, and it really shows the upward students of our hotel management in polite, because they haven't learned enough French to be able to pronounce those things correctly, or not been guided correctly. So I think it's so in fact, all this is a huge life experience. And learning a language like French, because I'm basically a French teacher, has been, of course, a huge life experience in and I'm not talking about French. I think even when it comes to German or Portuguese, it depends on in which field you're working, where you're working, with which people you're engaging. So I think that language may matter in a big way. And of course, institutional agreements, if you're university would like to come up with institutional agreements with European universities, those are then co-financed also by France, and in the case of French, but also in the case of Germany or in other European states. So I think that is very important for you to know, is that that these institutional agreements can then be used. Some institutional agreements last for so many years. I mean, we all feel we want, we'll sign up with a huge university and not have anything with that university eventually in the long run, but actually work with one or two schools or one or two universities in Europe very closely, and actually come up with meaningful programs, joint programs, and meaningful mobility between faculty and students of the two universities. I know, and I've been the chairperson of the internationalization program of Goa University for so many years, and I have seen how this all this works. We signed several agreements, but there are our star agreements which actually impact our university in a much more meaningful way. If you look at language as a if you look at language as a tool for soft power projection, you will know that that language then is very much a part of public diplomacy. Is very much a part of strategic communication. Like I've already spoken about it. Why use interpreters when you have when you have people?
Say while you were in JNU?
I was in and we can speak it. So now what I'm trying to say, now let's, here this is serious business. We are talking about our own careers and our professions. We're talking about how we are going to go ahead. So I think that is then language is then going to be a game changer for those who are interested in engaging in a more at a high level. There are several opportunities to study in Europe. There through the Campus France. You can go to your there's through DAR. There's the Fundação Orient for Portuguese. So you can visit their websites and see more. There are many. And of course, like I said, Erasmus Plus has been also a huge game changer in mobility of students from India to European countries. If I one second, I'm sorry. Just trying to change the next one. If you take the case of the French mobility, you will see that there are scholarships available for students at all levels. Whether you're a bachelor student, whether you're a master student, whether you're a PhD, there are scholarships, short term, long term. So there are various durations. You can either do your masters in France, you can do one semester in France, you can do you can do your PhD in France, or you can just go there for your PhD research, which is a short-term scholarship. So there are various durations available. I think the same things are available for other languages as well. But since I know the French system very well, I thought I would just give you an example. So I just said it's a case of French mobility. Of course, various fields in which France is very well known for. So you have gastronomy, which is a huge, attraction in France. You have all these schools of cordon bleu, etc., where you can go and study. There's of course enology. We recently sent a student who's gone to do a 1-year bachelor's program in enology, which is the science of wines. He is interesting. The student is interested in being an entrepreneur, actually. Is not really interested in anything very academic, and just thought that after his bachelor's program here, he would go and do this course so that when he came back, he could be an entrepreneur, work in the wine industry, etc. Political science, like I already said, there's the Sciences Po, wonderful schools, very, very well known. European studies, of course, in many, many universities, including the Sciences Po. Management, because they are very, very well-known management studies programs, especially the INSEAD, which is which is world-renowned. Sciences in France is very much ahead in life sciences. Of course, one would imagine also in aerospace, because that is where they all are. Film and media studies, huge attraction in France. And let me tell you, film and media studies, there are people from all walks of life who go for that. I'm not talking about people who are actually filmmakers or journalists, or we would like to believe that only people like that are interested in that. But let me tell you, even a person from international relations is interested in film and media studies, because there is this whole thing of art and cultural diplomacy, and film, of course, Indian film industry is a huge soft power. And we have been promoting our films in all these countries in Europe, and also European films in India, so through festivals, etc. So I think we should take it out of our minds that we have to work in a single field, and if we are if we are engaging in, for example, only international relations, that all this things nothing to do with me. Let me tell you, everything has to do with you. And all these fields have something to do with us, whether it's gastronomy, whether it is film and media studies. Recently, I was approached by a person from France, wanted to do a PhD, and she said, I want to work on food as diplomacy. And well, this person was an of an Indian origin and an ex-student of mine from many, many years ago, who had married a French diplomat and traveled all over the world, and said that I think that I know what it is, because every, the food you serve in embassies or in residences of ambassadors is very much a part of the diplomacy, and how you serve it, what you serve. And I mean, I know that every time we have a head of state coming to India, in the papers we can read the menus, right? What was served to this person. And I think that is very important, that how food can actually be used as a thing. And then when you talk about food, you talk about wines, you talk about, I mean, do we pronounce the names correctly? That is the first thing. I did I did one small workshop for the Taj in Goa, in which I helped their staff pronounce the names of the wines correctly, and to pronounce the names of the dishes which were French in their menus correctly. You cannot say vol au vent and things like that. When you, so it makes a huge difference, because people do travel, people do know how things are pronounced, and it really shows the upward students of our hotel management in poor light, because they haven't learned enough French to be able to pronounce those things correctly, or not been guided correctly. So I think it's so in fact, all this is a huge life experience. And learning a language like French, because I'm basically a French teacher, has been, of course, a huge life experience. And I'm not talking about French. I think even when it comes to German or Portuguese, it depends on in which field you're working, where you're working, with which people you're engaging. So I think that language may matter in a big way. And of course, institutional agreements, if you're university would like to come up with institutional agreements with European universities, those are then co-financed also by France, and in the case of French, but also in the case of Germany or in other European states. So I think that is very important for you to know, is that that these institutional agreements can then be used. Some institutional agreements last for so many years. I mean, we all feel we want, we'll sign up with a huge university and not have anything with that university eventually in the long run, but actually work with one or two schools or one or two universities in Europe very closely, and actually come up with meaningful programs, joint programs, and meaningful mobility between faculty and students of the two universities. I know, and I've been the chairperson of the internationalization program of Goa University for so many years, and I have seen how all this works. We signed several agreements, but there are our star agreements which actually impact our university in a much more meaningful way. If you look at language as a tool for soft power projection, you will know that that language then is very much a part of public diplomacy, is very much a part of strategic communication. Like I've already spoken about it, why use interpreters when you have people in the field who speak the language very well. I mean, I just want to recount an anecdote. I was an interpreter with the Ministry of Defense several years ago, and there was it was some military equipment which was being showcased, and I had gone for the trials as an interpreter, and they insisted that there should be an interpreter because people was going to be speaking Hindi, and and people were going to speak English, and then perhaps the French people would not understand, and there would be communication problems. Let me tell you, I went there, and obviously this was a very confidential, high level. This was several years ago, it doesn't really matter. And at that time, we I went through this thing. I was translating, interpreting with all my enthusiasm, everything which was being, said, which was being asked to, to convey, etc. I did all this, and for I think we were there for 10 days. It was a huge thing, huge trial which was going on. And you will not believe it, that one of the persons from the French team on the last day revealed that he spoke Hindi. And the thing is that I said, okay, so he spoke Hindi. So what was the requirement then of the head of their mission speaking Hindi? Then what is the requirement of an interpreter? But they still needed an interpreter. They did not in any forum reveal that that person spoke Hindi. So I'm just saying that the thing is that we also should know how we leverage our language skills. We should know. I mean, recently at the Vibrant Goa also, we were engaging with a lady who spoke. She was a French lady, but speaking in English in the meeting, and she kept on speaking in French with her person and making some comments. Kind of forgetting that I was sitting right there and that I spoke French. And at the end of the meeting, said, "Oh God, she speaks French." And they had actually revealed their entire strategy of what they were looking at. And I mean, it was so transparent. I knew it all. So what I'm trying to say is that this is the lighter side of what knowing languages and being a part of different meetings, or being a part of different fora is all about. That the languages, you just have to sit there and you don't need to reveal that you know the language, but at some point people are going to know that you speak the language, right? So I think that is very important. Then of course we have these emerging geographies. Like when we talk about France or Portugal or Spain, we're not talking about France alone or Portugal or Spain. We're talking about francophony. We're talking about lusophony. That means because they have kind of created their own. These are the new geographies. It's not France alone. France is in some fora is not talking about themselves. They're talking about the larger interest of the French-speaking world. Or the Portugal is not talking about Portugal alone, but also taking into consideration, taking Brazil and other countries into their fold to actually engage with India. I mean, this was very. There was a huge Lusophone festival in Goa in 2022, and why would we hold such a huge festival? There were hundreds of people who were invited from all the Lusophone countries. And Lusophone countries sent cultural troops, dancers, singers, and everybody to Goa for this Lusophone festival. Why? Because all these countries really felt that only together they could engage with India. And it was it was mainly, of course, there were talks at the bilateral and multilateral level as far as that was concerned. It was a meeting of the CPLP, and they actually met to actually come together and show solidarity with each other, that here we are, all of us speak the Portuguese language, and we are going to work together in some fields. So I think so when there are these there is something called this Francophony Summit, where all the Francophone countries of the organization OIF, or the is in international organization of Francophonie, they get together and they have these summits, and they are held in different Francophone countries, and people from all over the world actually participate in this. Indians also do. I have myself attended the Francophonie Summit in Belgium in 2015, and was invited for a session which was being held in Mumbai a couple of months ago, I think a month ago perhaps. So I know that these the countries are then coming together, and which brings me to my next slide, which is actually talking about Europe sans frontières, Europe without borders, Europe beyond borders also. So the Francophone countries, you will see that there are a huge number of countries which are Francophone. Some are in some of the countries it is a national language. In some countries it's more regional. Then some people are associate members, some countries are associate members, some are observers, etc. And if you look at the Lusophonia, the community of Portuguese language speakers, you will see that India is one of the observers and one of the, I think, associate members. Sorry, I stand corrected. It's an associate member. Why? For obvious reason, because of Goa. Similarly, you have Hispanophonia, or the Hispanic countries, where so it's not, it's beyond Spain. So actually Europe is actually beyond, the language is beyond borders. So that is what is important. Then if you come to the common uh, European framework of reference, and I think that is something which is more important to you all, is that you must know that there are levels of learning language. One is the basic user, who can understand everyday expressions, basic phrases, introduce himself or herself, ask and answer questions. But the A1 user is really a very basic user. But even for an A1, you need 100 to 120 hours of classes. You cannot have so an A1 is really quite basic. You can do very little with an A1. You can just about talk about yourself, introduce yourself. I mean, I know I'm a A1 user of Portuguese, and I know where I can draw the line. I can just about introduce myself. I understand when people speak generally what they're talking about, but I cannot engage in the same way as they are talking about. But it gives an impression that I know Portuguese, but actually I really cannot communicate effectively in that language at all. As far as A2 is concerned, then here you have a little more knowledge. You can use expressions. You understand, more or less what people are saying. You can actually engage with them to some extent. I mean, if I look at my own language proficiency, I am an A2 user of German. And so I know that I can talk, I can go shopping, I can ask for directions, I can understand directions, I can explain some basic things on how to reach somewhere. I can, talk about my background, where I come from, what I do. And I can just talk about the very immediate environment in which I live and which concerns me and my life alone. So, but that again needs another 100 to 120 hours. So, people who feel that they can do, there's a quick fix of doing a course in 30 hours, 40 hours. Let me just, I've done this and this is enough for me. I think this is really a fallacy. Learning language is a serious business. And I think, we should all understand that we need to have a certain level of language to be able to engage in different fields. Then we also have what is called the second level, or the independent user, which is the B1. Now B1 and B2 are independent users. They are a little more comfortable in the language. I think anybody who wants to start off using language in communication or in their careers and professional fields should have at least a B1, if not a B2. B2 is actually the level which you need. But even if you have got a B1, you may be able to travel, understand, engage to a certain extent, and you can describe experiences, and you can events, you can talk about certain events, etc. But for that, you really need to have a B1. B1 excuse me, is considered to be really the basic language, the basic level which you require to do anything in the profession, in your profession, if you are going to use language communication in that. B2 is, of course, ideal for all professionals. If you have a B2, you are really going to be able to participate in discussions. You're going to be able to talk about your specializations. You can give your opinions very lucidly. Sorry. Very lucidly. You can interact basically in a very meaningful way. You can there is not much strain in what you're trying to say. You can be confident that your idea has been put forward, etc. Your viewpoints have been understood. So I think, and of course this is although this is something which people end up getting to do. This level is something which you get to on your own sometimes, but of course, there are courses for this. There, it's absolutely, you're very familiar with media. You can read everything. You can talk about anything if you're a C1 or a C2. To be a teacher of the language, you obviously, or an interpreter, you need to be a C1 or a C2. A C2 actually, to be an interpreter or a translator. You need the C1, C2. You cannot really be translating with a B1 or a B2. B2, some of our students are B2 and they do try and translate, but they can really do very basic text. But if you're looking at technical or journalistic, or you're looking at official documents, etc., you really need a C1, C2. But that is something which you can then, you can come up, you can attain a little bit on your own with self-study and a lot of reading. So I think it was important to know what are the levels of proficiency in languages which you need to have to actually work in that language. And when you say I have a working knowledge of the language, it really doesn't mean very much, because working knowledge doesn't means you need to. I mean, I get scared when people say I have a working knowledge, because they really don't have a working knowledge sometimes. Working knowledge means actually I can work in that field with the knowledge which I have. So that people feel if I can understand, it's a working knowledge, but that's not really what it is. If I may just go to almost towards the end of my talk, but I will of course field any questions which you may have. But what I think, and this is perhaps the most important thing, is that what is then the advantage of learning European languages in the context of the EU-India relations? I'm sure all of you want to be aware of this. What is, we are, like I said earlier, we are all multilingual. There's a difference between plurilingualism and multilingualism. Multilingualism is what we are. Multilinguals are what we are. We are able to speak a certain number of languages. Right from childhood, we have been able to speak English, perhaps Hindi, perhaps our own, also our own, mother tongue, perhaps one more language, because we live in different regions. So we are all speaking 2 or 3, 4 languages without any difficulty. That is multilingualism. Plurilingualism is actually using any of these languages in a particular context for a particular purpose. And I think that is what learning foreign languages will lead us to, will lead us to a plurilingual environment, where we are, for example, you may speak your mother tongue at home, you may speak English at your workplace, but are you able to speak French when you are in a meeting where there are people who speak French? Or are you able to speak French in a situation where you need to use that language? So that is, I think, what we need to know. We should be able to appreciate in some way the nuances in languages, see the differences. When you learn foreign languages, I mean, believe me, when I always say it, when you learn French, German, or any other language, you actually become a better English speaker as well, because you juxtapose these languages which you learn. You have learned English when you were in school, or Hindi when you were in school, and so you have not really understood some points of grammar or some points of communication. You've just taken them for granted. You have imitated, you've spoken, you've repeated, etc. That's how you learn the language. But when you learn a foreign language, you actually get back to your roots and you start looking at the differences and the similarities between the foreign languages and your own languages, and you will see that it's such a fruitful thought, and line of thought rather, that you can actually understand, why do they say this? Did we know that this is what is a part of past tense in Hindi? I was trying to teach Hindi to a Frenchman, and I can really tell you that it was so difficult. I could not answer the questions because I'd never learned Hindi in the same way as I'd learned French. And if you ask me any point of grammar, I have written a book on contrastive grammar between English and French for Clé International. And I really, when I actually wrote that book, I realized that my English had also improved in a huge way. And I suddenly made discoveries in English which was not aware of. So, I mean, even at a late age of, of being in the 50s, I suddenly made huge discoveries, and I said, "Oh, really? This is how it is. Is this why this is like this in English?" And I've spoken English all my life, and I consider myself to be proficient in English. So the thing is, when you learn a language, new language, you juxtapose it with the languages you already know, so you kind of understand and appreciate the nuances of these languages in a better way. Then, of course, better communication and engagement. I have no need to repeat that, because I've spoken about this earlier. With your partners and your associates, you are going to have better communication and engagement. Of course, you're going to have an enhanced cross-cultural competence. Understanding, I mean, just speaking the language sometimes is not enough, but understanding the culture of the person who speaks that language, and why Germans and the Swiss are on time, and why punctuality is important in some countries, and why people, spend so much of time over their meals in some countries. Why do people eat in 10 minutes in some countries? And it's a cultural thing. And we have to be, I mean, I meet Indian businessmen, sometimes and they say, my God, when we go to France, they're eating food for 2 hours, and it's just such a waste of time, because these, we want to like finish our work and leave, and they're eating over 2 hours. How does one work while drinking a glass of wine? And so these are all cultural things which we have to understand in other countries, how things work. The Portuguese also have a different way of working. They are they are much more laid back in other ways. They take things slowly. They don't get into anything straight. They will take one by one. They take all the points into consideration. They take their time over making decisions. They, in a lighter way, and it is what we call sossegado. That means something which takes time, which is thought of, is done calmly, and so they have a different way of doing business, I think. And similarly, I'm sure Germans, if any of you have had experiences with Germans, you will know that they have a very different way of, I mean, I can only be anecdotal from stories which are told to me. I don't want to be stereotypical, but I think it's important that that you have some cross-cultural competence, and understand how other people work. What is the expectations from you when you're working with foreigners or Europeans? There are some expectations, and I think that is what is important. We have had this. We have had people traveling towards Europe from India, and Europeans traveling to India for time immemorial. So we have, I think, ever since Megasthenes came, and then we had Marco Polo, who went through India at one point towards China, and then we had we had several Portuguese travelers. We had Bernier coming from France. So we had all these people. So we have had visits here. And similarly, and why did they come here? They came here to understand our culture, our traditions, and they wrote about it extensively, all these people. So similarly, we have also gone to Europe, and we have seen how how things work over there. And I think what we need to do is we need to imbibe from what we have learned from them. We need to respect that culture. We need to imbibe from that culture. There's some really good things. There are best practices, and we need to imbibe from those best practices. I always believe in that. And of course, there is going to be an increased mobility, familiarity with the country when you speak the language. Multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary research, I think, is very important, because I think being in a university setup, I have realized with time that we are now looking beyond just language studies. We are looking at interdisciplinary research. We are looking at interdisciplinary studies where languages will play a huge and very, very important part. Interestingly, and I think this would interest some of you who are here today, one of my dissertation students is actually working with the archives, with the Goan archives, and working on relations between India and France through Portuguese documents. So apparently there are a set of documents in Portuguese which have recorded the conflicts which were happening in the Indian Ocean between Britain, of course, because India was Britain and France. And I think many of you will be familiar with that. And her work is between 1743 and 1764. And there was some conflict which was taking place in the Indian Ocean, and how the Portuguese came to the rescue of the French, etc. at that time. And she's actually talking about what is recorded in the Portuguese documents. Let me tell you that number one is, she is a student who then needs to know French, Portuguese, and English. So a person who is, so now she has actually gone through all these documents and translated them into English, and actually put up all that and written her dissertation in French. So it is these are the kind of this is the kind of research we are looking at. We are also, even French teachers are looking at didactics and how French was taught in Portuguese India, or how French was taught in Pondicherry to Indians. I think that is a huge; those are huge areas of interdisciplinary research, which will involve sociology, which will involve didactics, which will involve languages. So there are, I mean, these are just two examples which I'm giving. We have our students who go to Sciences Po actually are interested in international relations, and they actually end up working in international relations. I had a student who had also worked on the French intervention in Syria, and actually done a dissertation on that. So we are now looking into interdisciplinary studies in a big way, and let me tell you that languages will play a very, very important part in this. Foreign languages will definitely be required, because we are actually need to move on from what we already have, what we already know, and you can actually be one of those people who will learn languages, because you have the opportunity to learn languages and move ahead. Of course, establishing wider networks is a huge advantage, and of course, personal growth and adaptability. I don't need to say this, but it's a huge gain from foreign languages. I have gained tremendously from the languages I know. In a lighter vein, I'm told that the more languages you speak, the less chances you are of getting Alzheimer's, but definitely has made me more of a creative person, has made me not only multilingual, which is a given, but multidimensional in many ways. It has led to my personal growth. And this is not about me, but this is just an experience which I wanted to share with all of you, and I hope all of you do take this seriously, and look at whatever you are doing from the language perspective, and see how you can then involve foreign languages, and how you can build on these languages to actually carve for yourself a career which is a niche. Actually, you will be one of, sometimes when I say that, it surprises me when I was introduced somewhere as the only Konkani to French translator in the world, and I said, oh, really? And it is true that I am, but there are no other translators. But I never ever thought about it until I was introduced as such. So so basically, what you have done is you've just carved a niche for yourself, and I think all of us need to do it. All the participants here will definitely agree with me that it is something which is food for thought, and I hope and I wish all of you the very best. Thank you so much. I'm ready to take any questions which you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an engaging lecture. And there's so many points that I've personally taken out of it, and especially because we are a nascent school for European language studies and French, etc., and we'll be growing into other languages. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So there are so many, points that I have myself learnings from your lecture. Are there any questions that somebody students would like to ask? Yes, Niharika. Please introduce yourself, talk about your institutional affiliation, and please go ahead and ask your question.
All right. First of all, thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful talk. As a person who's also interested in languages, and I've learned French as well, I think this was quite engaging and quite informative. So I have two questions for you today. First of all, ma'am, you spoke about the need for someone who is well versed in a language, as well as having academic backing in various fields. So me, for example, if I can just expand on that a bit, I've also learned French, and I'm learning Mandarin as well. And I'm doing my my bachelor's degree in international relations and public policy. And I want to go into the field of translation and interpretation. Do you think it's of any value to learn how to actually translate, or is just knowing the language sufficient?
Well, definitely not. I mean, you're asking a person who has done an MA, an MPhil, and a PhD in translation. So I have actually been in the field of translation, but I can assure you that there are definitely, to be an interpreter translator, you need to have training. There is no doubt about that. Now the thing is, There are many people who are interpreters and translators without training also, and there are people in this field. Let me tell you, they are, and some of them may be good. There's no doubt about it that they have it in them to quickly code switch and to be able to understand. This is a work of a genius. But now let us just consider ourselves not to be genius. Not to be. We are not genius. Genius. Genii. Okay, we are not. Considering ourselves as such, we are actually thinking that everything has a process, and translation has a process. There's a very huge theory behind it, Niharika. And if you understand that theory, you will be a better translator or an interpreter, because you know exactly what you're doing. You cannot. It is not a craft. It's not like actually translating. Many writers translate their books, that is, translate literature or translate their own books into other languages, or they translate literary works, and they say, oh, we are not trained translators. Literature is a different ball game. And when I'm talking about the kind of translation which you are talking about and being an interpreter, you have to be efficient. Like, for example, to be an interpreter, it's not just going there, listening here and there, and translating things. You must learn how to take notes. There's a special way of taking notes. It's really very interesting, that and those notes is not putting down every word. There is a pictographic thing which you learn when you are doing interpretation, and you have to take those notes. You should be able to do multitasking, and all that you learn only through training. Multitasking is listening and sometimes speaking at the same time if you're doing simultaneous interpretation. And if you are doing consecutive